In the name of Allah, most gracious, ever merciful, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, peace and blessings be upon you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to the York University Peace Symposium. We start the proceeding with a brief recitation from the Holy Quran. I would now request Basil Bhat Sahib to come and recite a portion from the Holy Quran and its translation.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace, mercy, and blessings of Allah be upon you all. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. وعد الله الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لهم مغفرة وأجر عظيم. والذين كفروا وكذبوا بآياتنا أولئك أصحاب الجحيم. Following is the English rendering of the verses just presented in front of you, as done by Hazrat Maulvi Sher Ali Sahib, may Allah be pleased with him. Selected from chapter 5, verses 9 to 11. I seek refuge in Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful. O ye who believe, be steadfast in the cause of Allah, bearing witness in equity. And let not a people's enmity incite you to act otherwise than with justice. Be always just, that is nearer to righteousness. And fear Allah, surely Allah is aware of what you do. Allah has promised to those among you who believe and do good deeds that they shall have forgiveness and a great reward. And as for those who disbelieve and reject our signs, they are the people of hell. Jazakumullah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now to give us an introduction to the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat worldwide and here in Canada, I would request Mr. Lal Khan Malik, the National President of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat of Canada, to deliver tonight's introductory remarks.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon all of you. Beloved Huzur, Your Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, Chancellor Greg Sorbera, Honorable Minister Raza Moridi, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my distinct honor and immense pleasure to welcome you here at York University and those around the globe who are joining us through live streaming. Today's lecture, titled Justice in an Unjust World, is organized to promote a deeper understanding of Islamic concept of true justice. Today we have the honor of hosting a truly unique event with a keynote address by His Holiness the Caliph Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, world head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat. The Ahmadiyya Muslim Community is a dynamic, fast-growing international revival movement in Islam. Founded in year 1889, it spans over 200 countries with membership exceeding tens of millions. The Ahmadiyya Muslim Community is the leading Islamic organization to categorically reject terrorism in any form. Today, it continues to be an advocate for universal human rights and protection of all minorities, and champions the empowerment and education of women. The Ahmadiyya Muslim Community is the foremost Islamic organization with a central spiritual leader known as the Khalifa or Caliph. The community believes that only spiritual successorship in the form of Khilafat can uphold the true values of Islam and unite humanity. The community was founded by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace be upon him, who claimed to be the promised Messiah and Mahdi, who had been foretold by the Holy Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, and by other prophets to appear in the latter days. 5 spiritual leaders have succeeded the founder, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace be upon him, since his demise in 1908. His Holiness, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, is the 5th Caliph and current world head of the Ahmadi Muslim Community. Tonight's event presents a unique opportunity for thought leaders, academics, and influential members of the society to gather together for this message of peace by His Holiness. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lal Khan Malik. Our next speaker is Mr. Greg Sorbera, the Chancellor of the York University. Mr. Sorbera has a long and distinguished career in public services, serving as a minister at the provincial level for many years. He is widely respected for his dedication and commitment to serving his fellow Canadians. In June of 2014, Mr. Sorbera became Chancellor of the York University. I request Mr. Greg Sorbera to come to the podium.
Assalamu alaikum. Your Holiness, on behalf of York University as its Chancellor, I am thrilled to welcome you to this campus, and I am awaiting your remarks. I think that most of you know in this audience that His Holiness has been the spiritual leader of the Ahmadiyya community since 2003. In that capacity, he has the burden of seeing to the spiritual well-being of millions and millions of Ahmadiyya Muslims around the world. He has prepared himself well for this undertaking because as a young man he studied agriculture, nourishing the soil. And some of you may not know that in his early years he created a virtual agricultural miracle in Ghana, growing wheat in that country for the first time. Your Holiness, this 50th anniversary of the community in Canada is a fantastic milestone. And I know that the members of the community right across Canada are simply thrilled that you have given all of your responsibilities, taken so much time to be with the community over the course of the past several weeks. Your presence from Vancouver to Calgary to Toronto and Ottawa inspires a community that, as you know, is growing as fast and as dynamically as any organization in the country, with a mission that needs to be heard around the world, and that is a mission of peace and love for all and hatred for none. Well, as you know as well, I go back a long way with this community, at least in this small area of North York and Vaughan. I remember the early days of the diligent work of my friend Nassim Mahdi, preparing and then building a beautiful and inspiring mosque in the heart of Vaughan, and then watching as literally thousands of members of the community began to settle around that area. And more importantly, the impact, the positive and powerful impact that the community has had on the life, the social life, the community life, the spiritual life of the area, not just in Vaughan or in York region, but right across the province. We all look forward to hearing your remarks this evening. I think for me, as the Chancellor of this university, I am thrilled that you are here to speak in this hall on this campus. And I pray that your words inspire the mission of love for all and hatred for none. And thank you for allowing me to share this podium with you this evening. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Sobara, for your great remarks. Our next speaker is the Honorable Raza Moridi, Ontario's Minister of Research, Innovation and Science. Mr. Moridi is an accomplished scientist and engineer with many decades of academic and industry experience. Since June of 2013, he has served as Minister of Research, Innovation and Science. I now request Mr. Moridi to come to the podium.
Well, thank you very much. And, Your Holiness, Chancellor Sobara, ladies and gentlemen, it's truly a great pleasure and privilege on behalf of Premier Kathleen Wynne and the Government of Ontario most warmly extend my welcome back to Ontario, to Your Holiness. So we are always pleased, Your Holiness, to host you in our beautiful province of Ontario. And we look forward for your many more visits in the future to the City of Toronto and our province of Ontario. As you know, Your Holiness, the province of Ontario and our country, Canada, embraces the multiculturalism. Freedom of thought, freedom of belief is one of the principles that in Canada we practice. There are more than 200 languages spoken in our City of Toronto and in this province, and many more religions, faiths are practiced by citizens of Ontario and indeed our country, Canada. We are so blessed to be Canadians, where we can practice our religion, whether it is Islam, any branches of Islam, or Christianity, Judaism, or any other, or Hinduism, Buddhism, any other religions. This is the beauty of Canada. Some years ago, I put forward a motion at the Ontario Legislature proclaiming February 21st as the International Mother Language Day in Ontario. And some of you may know that the origin of this movement goes back to Dhaka, Bangladesh, where the Pakistani army in those days killed a number of students who were advocating for keeping their own language, Bengali, in Bangladesh. So as a result of that, of course, International Mother Language Day was created by the United Nations, UNESCO, and I had the pleasure and honor of bringing that motion to Ontario Legislature to proclaim International Mother Language Day in Ontario as well, which was passed unanimously by all members of the Parliament at that time. And in my speech to the Parliament, I said, Mr. Speaker, if I want to say the word hello in greetings in 6,000 languages spoken in the world, we should be staying here for maybe weeks. And indeed, I said this in 40 different languages, including, I said, Assalamu alaikum, supposed to root, and many other languages. But this is Canada, where we celebrate diversity, and we believe that diversity is our strength. In some countries around the world, they want to assimilate others. They don't respect other religions. They don't respect other languages. And you can see that today around the world, many, many wars happening in various parts of the world. The origin is in nationalism, is in dogmatism about religions, not having respect to languages and culture and religion practiced by other people. We see this in our own religion, my own religion, Muslim. I was born as a Muslim. And we see this in Middle East, for example, what's happening there. And we are so fortunate that in the Muslim world, we have a leader, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, His Holiness, who leads the Muslim world with his teachings, with his books, his sermons, and his meetings. He advocates peace, he advocates brotherhood, he advocates equality of all human beings. And we are so blessed to have leaders such as His Holiness. And we are so glad that His Holiness is visiting us. This is actually my second time having audience with His Holiness. The first time was a few years ago when Premier McGuinty was the Premier of Ontario, and I had the honor and the privilege of having audience with His Holiness. That was at Hilton Hotel, I remember, in Markham. And today I am lucky enough to have audience with His Holiness and look forward for many more in the future. So again, welcome back to Ontario, Your Holiness, and we look forward to hosting you in many, many more visits to Ontario as well. So I'm going to close by saying, love for all, hate for none. This is a great slogan. I keep talking, I keep promoting this. And before I leave the podium, I must also mention about one great man from the Ahmadi community. Of course, there are so many great men and women came after Ahmadi community, but one of the greatest one is the late Professor Abdul Salam. I'm a physicist by profession, some of you may know, and I got to know him. He is one of the giants of science who has served humanity and science immensely. So we have to always remember him. And he created apparently actually a center at Italy called Center for Theoretical Physics, where he used to bring, and is still the center, bring scientists from all over the world, particularly from developing countries, to continue their education and the research and the studies in that center in Italy. So I want to again thank His Holiness for taking time to visiting us, particularly at this time, at this year, that as we are celebrating 50th anniversary of Ahmadi community in Ontario. So thank you very much. Alaikum salam.
Thank you, Minister Muridi, for your beautiful remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, in many ways, tonight's event is historic in nature. Although His Holiness has delivered countless addresses at large international gatherings of distinguished world leaders, including the European Parliament, US Capitol Hill, British Parliament, and just a couple of weeks ago, the Canadian Parliament. Tonight's event is the first address His Holiness is delivering at a Canadian university. That His Holiness has chosen York University to deliver his invaluable message is a source of great distinction for the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat of Canada. His Holiness is known the world over for his many humanitarian efforts to alleviate poverty and suffering. He has worked extensively in Africa, building hundreds of schools and hospitals, earning the sincere appreciation and respect of many world leaders throughout the continents. In the West, too, it is the teachings and constant guidance of His Holiness that continuously drives Ahmadi Muslims to work for the betterment of the society. One of the most important undertakings His Holiness is carrying out is his persistent and tireless effort to bring the attention of humanity towards the utmost importance of establishing world peace. At this most critical time, in which the world is at a great unrest, it is this purpose again that has brought His Holiness to address us here today. So, without further ado, we now arrive at the keynote address by His Holiness titled Justice in an Unjust World. I respect beloved Hazur to please address us.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the gracious, ever merciful. All the distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessing of Allah be upon you all. Today, the world around us is constantly evolving and advancing. Unquestionably, in the past few decades, the world has moved forward in leaps and bounds in terms of technological development. Every day, new forms of modern technology and scientific advancement are being developed. Progress is being made in many spheres of our life. For example, modern form of communication and electronics are continually progressing at a rapid rate. The research and development taking place is bringing ease and comfort to our daily lives. This proves that human beings have been able to use their intelligence and minds to move forward and to increase productivity, efficiency, and personal comfort. However, it is a cause of deep regret that at a time when humanity is progressing at such a rapid pace, it is also moving further apart and becoming increasingly divided. The peace and stability of the world is being jeopardized and put at risk on a daily basis. In some countries, the leaders and governments are failing to fulfill the rights of their people and are inflicting grave cruelties and injustices upon them. In response, members of the public are rising up in opposition, and so rebel groups have formed. Furthermore, conflict zones are fertile breeding grounds for terrorist groups and extremists. And so such groups have taken root in many countries. In some cases where there is civil unrest, foreign governments are siding with the leaders of the nations, whereas other governments are supporting the rebel factions. Thus, both sides are being provided overt and covert external support, and the results are there for all to see. Bloodshed, violence, and merciless killing of innocent people. Where modern technology has been a force for good, it has also been used as a force for evil and destruction. Such technology has been developed that has the capability of wiping nations off the map with the press of a button. I am referring to the development of weapons of mass destruction that are capable of inflicting the most unimaginable horrors and destruction and devastation. Such weapons are being produced that have the potential to destroy not only civilization today, but to also leave behind a legacy of misery for generations to come. In the world today, we witness double standards and hypocrisy at so many levels of society, and the resulting lack of peace is a cause of the utmost concern and grief for those people who sincerely feel the pain of humanity. As the leader of a worldwide Muslim community, it is this issue that concerns and worries me more than any other. As a Muslim leader, it is a source of grief to me personally that the disorder taking place today is centered around so-called Muslims and is being associated with Islam. On the one hand, most of the wars being fought and the lives being lost are in the Muslim world, whilst on the other hand, so-called Muslims have now spread their networks of terror further afield and are targeting innocent people here in the West. It is a tragedy of the very greatest proportions that such people seek to falsely justify their hate-filled and evil acts in the name of Islam. Rather than serving Islam, all they are achieving is to defame its name. The truth is that the very meaning of the word Islam is peace, security, and love. Given this, we have to accept that either the deplorable acts of terrorists and extremists are entirely against the teachings of Islam, or alternatively, that despite meaning peace, Islam is actually a religion that advocates extremism and violence. To assess which of these opposing propositions is correct, we must consider what Islam's true teachings are. We must look to the primary source of Islam, its holy book, the Holy Quran, and furthermore to the conduct and example of its founder, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him. Therefore, in the time available, I will now present Islam's true teachings to you, and thereafter, hopefully, you will be in a position to understand whether the division and conflict witnessed in the world today is a result of Islam's teachings or a consequence of moving away from them. During the life, the founder of Islam, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, laid down in just a few words the foundation for peace in the world and between all peoples. The Prophet of Islam, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, said that a person should desire for others whatever he desires for himself. I believe that this timeless principle is as true today as it ever was in the past. Certainly, every person desires peace for themselves and to be saved from all anxieties and worries. Every person hopes that he or she has the means to live comfortably and without hardship. Every person seeks good health so that they can enjoy their lives free from pain or difficulty. Every person craves good standing in their community and respect of others. In a similar vein, every government and every nation also seeks such prosperity. However, how many people or nations are there who truly desire peace, prosperity, and success for others? In terms of verbal proclamations, it is very easy to say that yes, we do desire the best for others. However, in practice, it is much more difficult and challenging. Wherever there is a conflict of interests, most people tend to prioritize their own interests and welfare over and beyond the rights of others. This is true at an individual level and also true at a collective and national level. Today, rather than selflessness, sadly we tend to see selfishness. Most people or nations prioritize their own rights and are quite willing to relegate and demean the rights of others in order to fulfill their own goals and ambitions. In terms of the Muslim world, it is because the leaders and people have discarded the true teachings of their religion that they are now driven by their deviance and unrest. Put simply, the leaders have failed in their duties to protect their people and to safeguard their rights. And in turn, rebel elements have also deviated from what is right and just. Instead of traveling upon a path of justice and integrity, we have seen time and time again the world's major powers being concerned only with fulfilling their own interests. Whether they decide to side with the Muslim governments or the opposition groups is not dictated by what is fair and what is right, rather only by which party better serves their own interests. Yet, according to Islam, our desire and motivation to fulfill our own interests should always be matched by our desire and motivation to fulfill the rights and interests of others. If acted upon, this is the golden principle that will unlock the door to true peace and security. In order to establish peace, Islam also places great emphasis on the fulfillment of one's trusts. Thus, chapter 4, verse 59 of the Holy Quran states, "Verily, Allah commands you to make over the trusts to those entitled to them, and that when you judge between men, you judge with justice. And surely excellent is that with which Allah admonishes you. Allah is all hearing, all seeing." In this verse, Muslims have been clearly instructed to fulfill the trusts that have been placed in them. This includes trusts and oaths that have been undertaken at a personal level and those trusts that are collective. In terms of personal trusts, a person should not seize the property or rights of others or fail to fulfill the responsibilities he owes to other people. In terms of collective trusts, one important aspect is the duty of the citizens to elect representatives of the state who they consider to be of the greatest value to their nation. When it comes to election or nominations, a person should not vote automatically for his ally or party member. Rather, they should consider who is the most qualified and suitable for the task at hand. Thereafter, those who are elected and handed the keys to government or power should exercise their duties with honesty, integrity, and justice. This teaching is the model of democracy that Islam champions. In every society, there are mutual trusts and obligations placed upon all people and for the society to function successfully. It is necessary for normal citizens and the leaders to fulfill their responsibilities towards each other with true justice. If these principles had been adhered to in the Muslim world, then we would never have seen the conflicts and division that are prevalent in many countries. I personally believe this Quranic principle to have universal value and to be of benefit across the world and not just in Muslim countries. The citizens of all nations should seek to elect those people to their parliaments or assemblies who they believe will work for the betterment and progress of their nation. This should be the guiding principle when voting for individuals or for particular policies, rather than merely following party lines or personal relationships. If the leaders of the country are those who truly seek the advancement of their people, rather than being corrupt and rather than focusing on selfish personal interests, then there will be no reason for people to turn against their governments or for civil wars or conflicts to arise. Leading on from this, the same principle of fulfilling trusts and oaths is something that the major powers and international institutions such as the United Nations must always prioritize. Weaker nations are often forced to rely on the support of more powerful and richer countries. And so, the latter should seek to fulfill the trust that those less economically developed nations place in them. They should try to sincerely help them stand upon their own 2 feet and realize that it is in the world's interest for weaker nations to develop and prosper. Similarly, at the United Nations, it should not be that certain countries wield undue power and influence, or that the permanent members of the Security Council care only for their own interests and utilize their veto power even where it is in conflict with the interests of the majority. Rather, all members of the United Nations should work together and fulfill the covenant of trust upon which the institution was founded, to maintain the peace and security of the world. If all nations and international institutions forego narrow self-interests for the sake of the collective good, then the conflicts that are plaguing the world will naturally die away. Sadly, the world is currently traveling in the opposite direction, wherein Muslim governments have failed their people, whilst self-interest is becoming the hallmark of the major powers and the powerful members of the United Nations. Hence, nations are neither fulfilling the trust placed in them, and more are they acting with justice and equity, and nor are they acting with justice and equity. Recently, the former United Nations Assistant Secretary General Anthony Banbury published an article outlining the failing of the organization in which he served. Writing in the New York Times, he said, "I love the United Nations, but it is failing. There is too much bureaucracy and little result. Too many decisions are made for political reasons, rather than following the values and objectives of the UN or by facts on the ground." Then he says, for the UN to continue and prosper, it needs a complete overhaul. And so an outside panel should examine the system and recommend changes. Thus, even those closely affiliated with the United Nations are now openly attesting to its shortcomings and the fact that it has failed in its mission to maintain the peace and security of the world. In terms of Western foreign policy mistakes, the prime example from recent years is the Iraq War in 2003. The former Foreign Minister of the United Kingdom, David Miliband, who is now the President of the International Rescue Committee, spoke some time ago of the long-term impact of the war, speaking about the continued instability and terrorism in Iraq. During an interview with the Observer, Mr. Miliband said, "It's clearly the case that the invasion of Iraq, or more importantly, what happened afterwards, is a significant factor in understanding the current situation in Iraq." When asked if Saddam Hussein would have been able to hold Iraq together and to keep it free from the likes of Daesh, he admitted that this was a distant possibility. This was the admission of a former British parliamentarian who had voted in favor of the Iraq War. Similarly, a well-known newspaper columnist, Paul Krugman, recently wrote in the New York Times that the Iraq War was not an innocent mistake, a venture undertaken on the basis of intelligence that turned out to be wrong. The public justifications for the invasion were nothing but pretexts, and falsified pretexts at that. Hence, even those who initially supported the Iraq War or who have been advocates for the United Nations have been forced to admit that mistakes and the grave consequences of their actions. There is no doubt that such injustices have shattered the foundations of world peace and have enabled terrorist groups such as Daesh to take root and grow. These groups are now not just a threat to the Muslim world, but to all humanity. However, still it does not seem that the world is learning from the lesson of the past. Foreign policy injustice continues to be prevalent and is fueling wars in different countries, leading to the deaths of innocent men, women, and children. Certain major powers continue to prioritize their business interests over and beyond everything else, and so are selling extremely advanced weapons to other countries, even where there is clear evidence that such artillery is being used to kill or maim innocent people and to destroy countless lives. What I am saying is nothing new or a secret, but has long been in the public domain. For example, a number of Western countries are continuing to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia that are being used to target the people of Yemen. No Muslim country has large-scale weapons factories that can produce such huge quantities of deadly and sophisticated weapons. And so their only source is the Western world. Some major powers are selling weapons to Muslim governments, whilst other governments are selling weapons to rebel elements in the same country. Thus, both sides are being fueled and armed from the outside. Quite simply, if this trading were stopped, the Muslim countries would have no weapon to fight one another. Even Western writers and commentators have spoken of the hypocrisy and immorality of such international trade. Yet, when questioned about such sales, governments either ignore the question or seek to justify what is patently unjustifiable. All they care about is that their checks clear so that billions are added to their own national budgets. In short, money talks and morality is left nowhere to be seen. How on earth can peace be achieved in such an environment? Terrorist groups also are able to acquire huge stocks of heavy weaponry and a continuous flow of funds. I often ask how it was possible for the terrorist groups, Daesh, to become so rich. Where does it get its millions from? Why has its funding not been stopped? How does it continue to trade oil and purchase weaponry? Western powers and the United Nations have been able to place extremely restrictive sanctions on powerful countries, yet for some reason have not been able to curb the funding of groups such as Daesh. Even now, despite belated efforts to try and restrict the funding of Daesh, it continues to earn millions of dollars. Recently, Canada's Minister for Public Safety announced that the Canadian government would no longer refer to Daesh as Islamic State. He said that Daesh was neither Islamic and nor was it a state. His comments were well made. and prove that Western governments are well aware of the fact that such terrorism is not based on Islam. However, at the same time, effective measures have not been made to stop the funding and growth of such groups. I have spoken at length about the lack of justice in the world, and so I shall now explain what Islam's concept of justice is. As time is limited, I shall cite just two verses of the Holy Quran that illustrate Islam's unparalleled teachings of fairness and equity. Chapter 4, verse 136 of the Holy Quran states, O ye who believe, be strict in observing justice and be witness for Allah, even though it be against yourselves or against parents and kindred, whether he be rich or poor. Allah is more regardful of them both than you are. Therefore, follow not low desires, so that you may able to act equitably. And if you conceal the truth or evade, then remember that Allah is well aware of what you do. In this verse, Muslims have been directed to be ready to give testimony against themselves and their family members in order to establish the truth and for justice to be served. A Muslim's loyalty to the truth must take precedence over everything else. Thereafter, in chapter 5, verse 9 of the Holy Quran, Allah the Almighty states, O ye who believe, be steadfast in the cause of Allah, bearing witness in equity, and let not a people's enmity incite you to act otherwise than with justice. Be always just, that is nearer to righteousness, and fear Allah. Surely Allah is aware of what you do. Having instructed Muslims to be willing to testify against themselves, in this verse the Quran commands them to be fair and just with all parties, including their enemies and opponents. This is the exalted standard of justice advocated by Islam. And so, if today's Muslim governments are not following this teaching, it is their fault. Hence, it would be entirely unjust and wrong to blame Islam for their misdeeds. Furthermore, I say again that the Western world is not blameless, and it is up to them to set aside their own vested interests and to selflessly work towards a better and brighter future for our children and future generations. If every policy made is based upon the solid foundations of justice and integrity, then automatically the conflicts that have consumed the world will be resolved without recourse to violence, bloodshed, and brutality. If we truly want peace in our time, then we must act with justice. We must value equality and fairness. As the Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, so beautifully stated, we must love for others what we love for ourselves. We must pursue the rights of others with the same zeal and determination that we pursue our own rights. We should broaden our horizon and look at what is right for the world rather than what is only right for us. These are the means for peace in our age. From the depth of my heart, I pray that Allah the Almighty grants wisdom to all parties and all nations, so that it is with this selfless spirit that they all work together for the betterment of mankind. With these words, I thank you all. Thank you very much.